She walked onto the AGT stage, pregnant, scared, and completely alone. The audience didn't know whether to clap or look away. Judges exchanged uneasy glances. But when this Filipino teen opened her mouth to sing, the room froze, because her voice carried heartbreak, hope, and a promise to an unborn child. A promise that would leave an entire theater in tears. The theater lights dimmed, and a quiet ripple moved through the audience as the host called her name. From the shadows, a pregnant Filipino teen stepped onto the AGT stage. She was small, almost fragile under the massive light, yet every eye in the room locked onto her instantly. One hand clutched the microphone tightly, the other rested protectively on her belly. As if reminding herself, "I'm not alone," there was a pause. Not the awkward kind, but the kind filled with uncertainty. Some audience members shifted in their seats. A few exchanged glances. No one said it out loud, but the question hung in the air. Is she ready for this? The stage was built for confidence. For bold dreams and big voices, not for someone carrying fear, judgment, and an unborn child. She took a slow breath. Her shoulders trembled slightly, but she didn't step back. Up at the judges' table, expressions softened. They had seen thousands of performers, but this was different. This wasn't just an audition, it felt like a moment of truth. The teen adjusted the microphone, her fingers shaking just enough to reveal how much courage it took to stand there. "I'm here for my baby," she said quietly. The words were simple, but they landed heavily. The room grew still. She explained. That life hadn't gone as planned. Dreams had been interrupted. Choices had consequences. And yet, in the midst of uncertainty, she found a reason stronger than fear: love. Every night she sang, every note she practiced, was no longer for applause or fame, but for the tiny life growing inside her. As she spoke, the audience began to see her not as a pregnant teen, but as a young mother fighting for hope. She glanced around the theater, taking in the size of the moment. For a brief second, doubt crept into her eyes. The lights were blinding. The silence was loud. But then she gently rubbed her belly and straightened her back. That single gesture said everything. "I will not give up." A judge leaned forward, resting their chin on their hand. Another nodded slowly. Something was changing in the room. This was no longer about talent alone. It was about humanity. She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and nodded to the band. The music hadn't even started yet, but hearts were already opening. In that fragile, powerful moment, before a single note was sung, the audience realized they weren't just about to hear a voice, they were about to hear a story. And it had already begun to change them. Before the bright lights and the thunderous applause, before the nervous smiles and anxious glances, her life had been a quiet struggle filled with hardship most people couldn't imagine. Born in a small town in the Philippines, she had always been a cheerful girl, full of dreams and laughter, until life took a harsh turn. Her family had fallen apart when she was just a child, leaving her to navigate a world that often seemed cold and unforgiving. By the time she became pregnant, the weight of responsibility had doubled. Abandoned by the person she had trusted most, she was suddenly alone, carrying a life she loved dearly, but without the security most teens took for granted. The fear of judgment, the whispers in the streets, and the uncertainty of her future could have crushed her spirit. Many would have given up, accepted despair, and hidden from the world. But not her. Music had always been her refuge. The streets, where she once sang just to earn enough for a simple meal, became her sanctuary. Each note she sang was a lifeline. A small rebellion against the cruelty and indifference she faced daily. People passing by would occasionally stop, offer a coin, or smile. Those tiny gestures of kindness reminded her that humanity still existed, even in a world that sometimes felt heartless. Evenings were the hardest. After singing for hours in the heat or under the rain, she would sit quietly, resting a hand on her growing belly, whispering promises to the child inside her. "I'll do better for you," she would say softly. "I'll make sure you know love. I'll give you a life filled with hope, even if I have to fight every step of the way." School had long been behind her, and friends had drifted away, leaving her isolated. Yet she never let bitterness take root. She discovered that even in her darkest moments, kindness, whether given or received, had the power to illuminate a path forward. Sometimes it was a stranger offering food, a neighbor lending a helping hand, or even a stranger pausing to hear her sing. These small acts reminded her that compassion could exist even in unlikely places. Her dreams of music were no longer about fame or applause. They had become something far greater, a mission to show that love, hope, and courage can survive even in the harshest circumstances. Singing on the AGT stage wasn't just about talent. It was about telling the world that her story and the story of her unborn child mattered. It was a message of resilience, a proof that kindness could lift people even when life seemed unfair. Every struggle she had endured had shaped her voice, infusing it with authenticity and depth. Every tear shed, every night spent in uncertainty, had prepared her for this moment. And now, as she stood on the stage, the echoes of her past gave power to her presence. The audience wasn't just about to hear her sing. They were about to feel every hardship, every hope, and every promise she had ever carried. In that silence before the first note, the teen's life story was already speaking louder than words ever could. The moment the first note escaped her lips, the entire theater seemed to hold its breath. It wasn't the technical perfection of her singing that captured everyone's attention. It was the raw honesty, the trembling vulnerability, and the unfiltered emotion that poured from her heart. Her voice was fragile, yet it carried a weight that far exceeded her petite frame, filling the room with a quiet, undeniable power. As the song continued, her hands gripped the microphone tightly, knuckles white, her other hand resting on her belly as if to draw courage from the life she carried. Each note told a story of struggle, hope, and love. Every tremor in her voice spoke of nights spent hungry, days spent battling judgment, and years of silent longing to be heard. For the audience and judges, it wasn't just a performance, it was a window into a soul shaped by hardship, but defined by resilience. The judges, seasoned veterans of talent shows, had witnessed thousands of auditions, but none like this. Simon leaned forward, his usual stoic expression faltering as he listened. His eyes softened. His arm resting on the table twitched slightly, as if resisting the urge to reach out. Other judges exchanged glances, subtle nods passing between them, silently acknowledging that this wasn't about technical skill alone. This was about heart, courage, and the kind of authenticity that could move people to their core. Audience members were visibly affected. Some gasped quietly, others wiped tears from their eyes. Strangers reached for one another's hands, united by an unexpected, shared empathy. You could feel the collective heartbeat of the room synchronizing with her rhythm, a room full of people connecting to a story so real, it transcended language, culture, and expectation. The music swelled. And so did her voice. She sang not for applause, not for recognition, but for her unborn child. For the promise she had whispered in the quiet nights, and for the strength she had discovered within herself. Each note seemed to lift a piece of the weight she had carried for so long, allowing the audience to glimpse the pain and love that existed in equal measure. By the chorus, there wasn't a dry eye in the theater. Her imperfections became her power, a reminder that true beauty often resides in authenticity, not polish. A quiver in her tone, a subtle crack in her voice, and a glance toward the belly she cradled transformed her performance from a mere song into an emotional testimony. The room no longer saw a young, vulnerable girl. They saw a warrior of the heart, a mother-to-be who had chosen courage over fear. When the last note lingered in the air, the silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't the absence of sound that was striking, it was the collective recognition of something extraordinary. The teen had not just sung a song. She had shared a piece of her soul, and in doing so, she had created a moment of universal connection. The audience wasn't just moved, they were transformed, reminded of the enduring power of empathy, resilience, and human kindness. At that moment, one thing was certain: the stage had witnessed more than a performance, it had witnessed the limiter. Undeniable proof that even the smallest, most fragile voice can echo in the hearts of millions, leaving an impact far beyond what anyone could anticipate. By the time she reached the final note, the theater had fallen into a profound silence, the kind that feels heavier than any applause. Her voice had already carried the story of her life, the struggles, the loneliness, the nights of despair, and the unwavering hope that had kept her moving forward. Now, as the last vibration faded, the impact of her song settled over everyone in the room like a warm, yet aching, embrace. The judges' reactions were instantaneous. Simon, usually the epitome of composure, leaned back in his chair, his hand trembling slightly as he touched his chest. The corners of his eyes glistened with tears, betraying the raw emotion he felt, but rarely allowed himself to show on live television. Another judge's quivered as they whispered softly, almost to themselves, This is what it's all about." The room's energy had shifted entirely. No longer was this about competition, applause, or talent alone. It was about humanity, empathy, and the universal connection that binds us all through shared emotion. Audience members couldn't hide their feelings either. A woman in the front row covered her mouth, trying to hold back sobs. A man in the back, quietly, placed his hand over his heart, as if to steady himself against the waves of emotion washing over him. Strangers reached for one another's hands instinctively, sharing silent acknowledgement that what they had witnessed was something extraordinary, a performance that transcended music, transcended circumstance, and touched the essence of the human spirit. Some were moved by her vulnerability, others by her courage. But everyone was moved by her message, that hope, love, and kindness can emerge even from the darkest struggles. In that theater, the usual judgments about age, background, or social expectation dissolved. Here was a young girl, a mother-to-be, whose strength and honesty demanded recognition, not because she sought it, but because she had earned it through the life she had lived. A moment later, the audience rose to their feet. The applause was thunderous, but even more than the clapping, there was a sense of collective understanding. People weren't cheering merely for a song, they were honoring a journey. A battle fought in silence, and a voice that had courageously spoken for those who couldn't. Some judges wiped tears from their eyes before standing, joining the audience in a heartfelt tribute that extended far beyond the stage. The teen herself stood still, breathing heavily, her eyes scanning the room. She had expected skepticism, judgment, and perhaps disappointment. Instead, she found compassion, respect, and a shared sense of humanity. The realization struck her profoundly. Sometimes, it isn't talent alone that changes hearts, it is the honesty behind the talent. The courage to show one's true self, and the willingness to let others feel the journey that has shaped you. In That transformative moment, the theater wasn't just a place for a competition, it became a sanctuary for empathy. The audience, judges, and performers alike were reminded that life's most powerful stories often come from the most unexpected voices. And this teen, with her trembling hands and unwavering spirit, had reminded everyone that acts of courage and kindness, no matter how small or fragile they seem, have the power to transform hearts and create lasting change. For everyone present, it was no longer just an audition. It was a lesson in humanity, a lesson that would linger long after the stage lights dimmed. As the final echoes of applause faded and the bright stage lights dimmed, the teen took a slow, steady breath. Her heart was still pounding, not from fear, but from a mix of relief, pride, and an overwhelming sense of connection she had never felt before. The audience had seen her story, her struggles, her courage, her love, and they had responded not with judgment, but with empathy, respect, and kindness. In that moment, she realized she was no longer invisible. Walking off the stage, she could feel the lingering energy of the theater, the silent acknowledgement that her voice had left a mark on everyone who had witnessed it. Every tear, every whispered wow, every hand held over a heart was a reminder that even the smallest act of courage could ripple outward, touching lives far beyond what one might imagine. She placed her hand on her belly once more, feeling the life growing inside her, and whispered softly, "We did this together." Backstage, the judges gathered around, offering words of encouragement that went beyond standard praise. Simon, usually composed and reserved, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You've shown more bravery than most adults ever will," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "And your voice? It isn't just talent. It's truth. It's hope. It's everything that makes people believe in the goodness of the world." Another judge nodded, tears glistening in their eyes, adding, "What you've shared tonight, it will stay with everyone who heard it, forever." For her, the moment wasn't about winning, recognition, or fame. It was about understanding the power of vulnerability, the importance of hope, and the transformative impact of kindness. She had stepped onto that stage, carrying fear, doubt, and uncertainty, and she walked away, carrying something far greater. The knowledge that even a young, struggling girl could inspire millions simply by being brave enough to be herself. Outside the theater, the night air was cool, and the city lights reflected in her eyes like tiny stars. People who had witnessed her performance earlier would carry that moment with them in conversations, in reflections, in acts of kindness that might never be directly connected to her, but were sparked by her courage. She smiled faintly, realizing that this was the real reward, the ability to light a spark of hope in others. Even while still walking her own difficult path, in the quiet of that night, she thought of her unborn child and the life she hoped to create. She imagined teaching them the lessons she had learned, that fear is temporary, but courage and kindness lasts forever. That judgment fades, but empathy endures. And that even in the most challenging circumstances, love can transform despair into hope. This wasn't the end of her story, it was the beginning of a journey she and her child would take together, built on resilience, compassion, and the belief that the world could still be a place of kindness. As she disappeared into the backstage shadows, the echoes of her song still lingered in the hearts of everyone present. She had done more than sing, she had reminded the world of something essential. True strength isn't measured by what you have, but by the love, hope, and courage you carry forward, even in life's hardest moments. And in that truth, there was a quiet, unwavering promise that no matter the challenges ahead, hope and kindness would always lead the way.